Welcome back to the Rules of Engagement. I hope you guys enjoyed some of those graphics you saw, because fullsail.edu teaches you how to make a lot of awesome stuff. Graphic design, audio engineering, video production, animation, all the tools that basically you need to learn if you want to be part of a basically video design team or even a part of esports team like MLG. A lot of skills are needed to produce the content. Fullsail.edu is a great way to get started on a potential career down that path. So go ahead if you're at all remotely interested, you're graduating soon, you're wondering what your next step might be, give it a check out. www.fullsail.edu/MLG. It'll give you a lot of information depending on what type of programs you're interested in. Also, don't forget, especially going forward, I'm about to go over MarineKing Prime versus Seed game number 4. There's a lot of awesome games here saying, what happened to game number 3? Or even after you watch game number 4, you want to see it in more detail. All of our VODs are at youtube.com/official MLGSC2. Pretty much every content we do here gets up there, usually within an hour or two. The Seed one took a little bit longer, but it should be up there shortly as well. A lot of great content there. Every single game from the Winter Championship at Dallas is up there as well. So you missed the finals, Life versus Flash. You heard about Bomber versus Ghost User game 3. You're like, that was awesome. I want to check that out. On youtube.com/official MLGSC2. But now, let's get into game number 4 between Seed and Rain. Of course, a couple cool things here. We're going to talk about how Seed has been adapting to the timing that MarineKing Prime has been using. Talk about a little bit of techniques you can do as a Terran player to micro against Storm. And then also, we're going to talk about Ghosts in Terran vs. Protoss, and when you want to get them and when you don't, and how they basically are involved in the matchup in particular. So we'll jump into this game now at the 8-minute mark. And, first a brief mention. I talked about how, we skipped game number 3. Game number 3 is pretty awesome. Seed is a very adaptive player to his opponents, and he noticed MarineKing's scouting patterns in game number 1 and 2, basically that MarineKing Prime didn't scout after that first SCV. A lot of Terrans hide an SCV around here. And then around the 6-minute mark, they send that SCV, or actually they'll hide it like in here or something. Around the 6-minute mark, they send in to check there's a natural on it. If they don't see a natural, they're going to know something's up. But MarineKing wasn't doing that, so Seed did a really well executed Void Rail and just caught MarineKing totally off guard. It's a great VOD to check out if you're a Protoss interested in utilizing some of those builds, and a great mind game played by Seed. But now game number 4, he's noticed that MarineKing has been doing this 2-base powering build every single game. Double reactor. And then, of course, a 4th and 5th barracks will come down shortly. And in games 1 and 2, we saw Seed really struggle at defending that type of powering 2-base play. So here in game number 4, he's making some changes. As we go forward, a couple changes we'll note is 1, a single forge instead of double forge. In game number 1, he went double forge. And, of course, that slowed down his Templar tech. He didn't have Storm out to deal with that timing. A single forge will give him a little more gas to play with, so he can progress to the Templar tech a little bit quicker. We can see Twilight Council's on the way as well. So that's the first adaptation. The other one, keeping all his units back, saving all the energy, and of course, getting a few less sentries to save some gas, but getting a few, an observer out a little bit faster. There should be one. Where's that guy? What type? Oh, there's observer. There's 2. There's one here, and then there's one crossing map. So getting the observers out a little bit faster so that he can basically scout his opponent without having to use that sentry energy. And then another thing is he's getting immortals. So he's powering up his army basically in several different ways to deal with that timing. And then if you look at the production tab, not even getting charged, going straight to the Storm because, he sees double reactor. He knows that MarineKing's been doing this. Needs that Storm to deal with the high Marine count MarineKing's going to throw at him. There's the 4th and 5th barracks right now, the standard for this 2-base powering type of play coming from MarineKing. So Seed's made a bunch of adaptive changes, and because of these basically shortcuts he's made in the single forge, going straight for Storm before charge and getting a couple Immortals, he can do this play where he defends a drop with a series of units over here. And then as well as, remember, the front, I talked about how you can defend it just with Force Fields and Photon Overcharge very efficiently as long as you land them well. And this is the key moment right here coming in, is basically hitting those Force Fields perfectly. We can see on this Nexus, this dotted white line here. Right, if you notice this dotted white line here, that's the range of Photon Overcharge. He just put it on the Nexus. And so when you do the Force Field, you want to make sure you basically find the smallest path that keeps those units inside that dotted line where that Nexus can nail them. And ideally, you want to actually as close as possible so that any medevac that tries to save units on different sides of the force fields can be focused down by that Photon Overcharge very efficiently. So going forward here, we're going to see right here, You see, this is where he thinks the shortest path is. We can see the first force field go down, and ideally what you want to do is you want to cut off usually a third of the Terran force, right? And this is a general rule of thumb. It depends on how big your army is, how big their army is. But if you cut off too little, right? If you cut off like 2 Marines, what happens? Well, you only kill 2 Marines, and it's not terrible, but you'd rather kill more than 2 Marines. I mean, it's like, would you rather take, 1 slice of pizza or 2, right? Grab 2, right? If they're free. So you don't want to just get 1 or 2 Marines. But you bite off too much, even with photon overcharge, you won't die to the attack. But if there's enough units, they can focus down a couple of your sentries, and then going forward, you're not going to have that many force fields. So what you really want is about roughly something like this many units right here. So you want to grab those units, which means that the force fields have to pretty much be like along this line right here, right? So that's the type of force field arc you want to do to cut off 5 to 6 units, right? 5 to 6 units. If you cut off that many, the Terran will lose enough that it's a good win for you. But 5 to 6 units at most really focus on 1 sentry because they'll be dying very fast. You got the mortal there and the photon overcharge. So let's see exactly how he pulls that off. If he can land him just right. Let me get back in here. We're actually going to slow this down normal so we can see kind of slow motion and a little bit zoom in. See if he lands him. So there we go. See right there? He got 5 Marines, and then going forward, 1 Marauder. Right? 5 Marines, 1 Marauder. That's exactly the right number. This medevac here, ideally you'd focus it with the Nexus, but he's got a lot of micro to deal with. Often you can just let that Nexus do whatever it wants to. Right now it's just shooting Marines. A few more Marines sneak away, and then another force field. So now he's actually getting more than 5 to 6 units, but it's 5 to 6 at a time. Get a few more Marines here, and at the end of the day, he only used 5 force fields, and if you check out this units loss tab, 1,050 for MarineKing. So severe losses here, and Seed only lost 700, which is pretty good. I mean, that's 350 resources difference. That's a full Nexus. So you try to set that defense up right, and the range of photon overcharge. You find the shortest distance, so take the minimum amount of force fields. That's right here, and we can see that's exactly where Seed use those force fields to lay down a great, pretty much defensive setup against the timing that he noticed MarineKing was doing game after game after game. And then going forward, he's got +2 armor on the way. MarineKing is only at 1 attack, no armor on the way. So with Storm finishing up, with armor finishing up, and if we notice here, because of that great trade, he's only down by 12 supply, whereas normally in this situation, a Terran doing a 2-base powering build against attacking Protoss, they're ideally to be about a 30 supply gap. So great play by Seed. They're adapting to MarineKing's timing and setting up the perfect defense, even adding that 1 photon cannon to help out as well. Basically, perfectly. And then, of course, against the drop play, getting ready, preemptive time warp there. Guess he was hoping that when the units were landed, they would be unable to kite against the Zealots, which is very important because, remember, he has no charge. He skipped on that to get the faster Storm Tech. So, a little bit of a preemptive time warp. Maybe could have waited a second more to do that. But it's much better to use a time warp than it is to die, because right now he's still waiting. He only has 1 Templar here. He still wants to get a few more storms up before he can really engage confidently. Of course, charge and +2 armor would be ideal to have as well. So going forward here, MarineKing's trying to get some damage in, knowing that time is against him as the Templar count and upgrade differential increases. And this is the part where now all of a sudden MarineKing has to deal with Storm, right? So as he's coming in here, the important thing to realize from MarineKing, if you're a Terran player and you have to micro against Storm, one thing you have to realize is that, okay, he's got a Protoss army is always going to be mostly Zealots. If it's not mostly Zealots, into mid-game, once you're over 100 food, the Protoss is probably going to die. If it's not Colossi. Colossi is a little bit different because they can use force fields a little bit easier. But basically, if they're going Templar, most of their army is going to be Zealots. So you want to kite against Zealots anyway. And as they're kiting against those Zealots, what you want to pay attention to, right, is the High Templar. You're going to kite against the Zealots anyway, but keep looking at these 3 guys right here, right? These guys you probably can't quite see, but keep an eye on the extent of your vision, and just kite. You should be kiting like it should be like a monkey instinct. You shouldn't be thinking about it. It's just something you do. And your brain should be thinking, where are the Templar? Let me find them. And then it should be thinking also macro at the same time. Use your hotkeys to macro. But micro-wise, should be looking for those High Templar, because what you want to do, you're kiting against the Zealots anyway. Make sure that you never get in range to land a good storm. So this Templar right here, right, his storm range is roughly like something around like here, right? So your bio shouldn't go much past this line. If your bio is inside that storm range and you could potentially be stormed, it should be running backwards. right? And as long as you're always running, you know, skimming the edge of that storm range, the Protoss is going to have a very hard time landing those effective storms when the Templar are further back, right? Like in this situation. The Templar are close. We'll get to that in a second, but the main idea is you send a small squad to snipe those Templar if they're near the front of the army. If they're near the back, though, you can go ahead and engage. Right, we'll see exactly how he engages here. You can go ahead and engage and just stay away from the range of the storm, and it's fine. Like, normally, see right there, right when the storm, he, in fact, let's actually back this up just a hair. Oops, that was 3 hairs. We can see here if we slow it down here as he comes in. As soon as that Templar starts moving forward, you want to move back before the storm lands. You have to kind of assume it, right? So this Templar's moving forward here. Now the range of the storm is in this box right here. So right now, MarineKing should be moving back. Takes him about a second longer, and that's why he gets a little more damage here, because it's about a half second slow on pulling back. And again, you've seen this Templar, he knows that doesn't have energy, but now as they're approaching energy, he's running out of storm range. Storm range, of course, is right here. These units are already pulling back, right? So any storm that the Templar moves back, MarineKing steps in a little bit too close again. But the idea is always stay out of range. And the reason why you can do this is because normally, if you run in and out of range against the competition, once it includes Colossi, right? So later in the game, it becomes a little bit different battle, and that's when you really need Ghosts and Vikings. But once they have Colossi and long-range units, if you spend too much time running in and out of the battle, what will happen is, of course, you'll just get a bunch of free shots off. But in this situation, when basically the whole army is Zealots, and even the other units don't have more range than your Marauders and Marines, you can always kite backwards, and you won't be giving them free shots because you'll turn around and shoot every half a second or so, and it's part of your micro anyway, utilizing your greater range to your advantage. So going forward here, again, you always want to keep an eye on the High Templars, and basically make sure they're not super close to your army. And again, what he's doing is he sees the High Templar are kind of close to the front. You can try to run forward and try to snipe at a High Templar or two really quickly. This is a little bit of a big army to try to do so, and in fact, I wouldn't even recommend it in this position when there's sentries and cannons, but MarineKing likes to get in there and mix things up, so unfortunately, he targets an Immortal, which is not what you want to target because it won't go down very fast. By the time he kills it, he takes massive damage, and that's really not ideally what you want to do. You want to focus down those Templar. Immortals aren't really a significant threat. They're pretty much just, you can think of one Immortal as 2 Stalkers and just treat it like that. Microing backwards again. Now there's no High Templar, so he's trying to get damage done, but the damage has been done. He has no energy left on the Medivacs. His Marine count is significantly depleted, which means he's unable to kill Zealots or Archons very fast. But now he's at a situation that gets really interesting, okay? Because he's at this position now where a lot of Terrans are like, okay, he should be going Ghost right now, right? Like, if I was MarineKing, I would just add Ghost and win easily from here because Ghost counter Archons and Templar, right? But it's kind of an interesting situation because if you look at the economics of it, in fact, let's bring that up right now. MarineKing's still on 2 bases with only 50 workers, right? And he's trying to produce off a lot of barracks. So it's a little bit tricky because if he adds in Ghosts, that's going to cut away a lot of his money, right? The Ghost Academy is 150 minerals, 50 gas, and you know, each Ghost is 200 minerals, 100 gas. So it's going to significantly impact his Marauder Marine count, which means even if he lands EMPs, his bioarmy might be too small to deal with the charge lots and Archons, especially when we consider, right, remember the upgrades, right? He's only at 1 attack. He's going to be 1-1, and the Protoss is already working at 3 armor. I mean, ideally as a Terran, you wouldn't get into this position. This is what happens if you commit heavily to like a 2-base aggression and the Protoss techs and they defend well. Is that you're stuck in this position here where, you know, he lost a bunch of units, he took a lot of poor trades. Units lost tab is actually equal there, but most of what he's killed is Zealots, whereas what the Protoss has been killing is Medivacs and those high-tech units. So if you commit to a lot of that 2-base aggression, you're unable to really cripple the Protoss player economically. Then you're in a situation where it's very hard to add in Ghosts because your bio army won't be big enough to beat the Zealots because you're down in upgrades, and you don't have the economy to get both Ghosts and a huge bio army. So the other option is what MarineKing goes for, and I mean, Ghost, you can still try to go for Ghost. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea from this position, but the option MarineKing is going for here is not a terrible one. And what he's doing, if we look at this, is he's going to say, okay, right, you've got the high-tech army, but I know a couple things. I know that we've been constantly trading units, which means you don't have a stockpile of high Templar building up. You have a hard time basically building up your high-tech army because we've been trading as fast as you can replace them. That's what I know. I also know that it's 14 minutes in the game and nobody has a third base, right? This late in the game, the main starts to run out, right? We can see here, I mean, he's got probably about 2 minutes left to mine on that main, and then it's going to mine out. Usually around a 16-minute mark, it mines out depending on how the game goes. So what MarineKing's going to say is if I can keep the action going, prevent you from building up too many Templar to the point where I can't really micro against them very well, eventually you'll starve out, right? So that's the idea. Keep the action going, make the Protoss starve out. The problem here is really when he lost all the medevacs, he lost his healing ability, which really hurts that strategy. You need a high medevac count to do that also so you can threaten mass drops. But the strategy itself is still solid. Keep the action going. Eventually the Protoss will mine out. Meanwhile, of course, Terran, once you mine out too, well, he's got a third CC. Even if he did not have this third CC here, what he does is when he mines out, he just moves his main CC down to here, and he's basically back on a 2 basis of income when the Protoss has to drop down to 1, and then eventually it'll drop down to 0. Just because if you keep the action going, deny them that third base, eventually they'll mine out. So that's what MarineKing's trying to do. He's trying to starve him out by denying the third base. Unfortunately here, what happens is the trades are decent, right? But the upgrade advantage is kicking in more and more for Seed. So MarineKing's keeping the action going. He's trying to do damage here, going in, and now he senses he can actually go in and try to get a kill move. So he's pushing in here, but without the medevacs, the kill move doesn't quite happen. It's still looking very good for MarineKing. If he can back up, get the medevacs, replenish, if he can deny the third for about another 2 minutes, right? Remember, the main is getting very low. So MarineKing's goal here is, again, just to deny that third base, right? So at this point, he's like, okay, I can't kill him off right here, but I'll back up, constant medevac production, and eventually he'll mine out and he'll be unable to keep up with me in production because even though he has all these warp gates, once his mineral income drops, he won't have the Zealot count, and his important units, the Archons and Temple, will be much easier to snipe with the low Zealot count. Of course, because he's been focusing on armor upgrades, those help mostly the Zealots, not so much the Archons or the Templar. And it gets to a certain point where MarineKing's lost enough units, especially his Marines, where he's at this point where he can't trade super effectively against these Zealots, right? He can't do it. There's too many Zealots. His medevac count has been reduced, and the Marines and Marauder count is basically not high enough. There's only 8 Marines versus how many Zealots are there? There's 11 Zealots versus 8 Marines, which is a terrible position for the Terran player, not to mention the upgrade differential. So this is when he's pulling SCVs, right? And this SCV pull isn't an all-in, right? It's not like I'm going to pull these SCVs and go kill my opponent. It's I'm going to pull these SCVs, and I'm still going to mine with mules off 3 bases, right? And that's okay. And the SCVs, the goal is to trade them with the Zealots, because if you keep the Zealot count low for another minute or two, once this main mines out, he'll be unable to replace him at a fast rate. He'll be unable to fight me in the open here where he needs to take that third base, and I can continue the game. If I didn't pull the SCVs, I would be unable to get this trade with the Zealots and put myself in a place where I can basically keep the Protoss down. So that's why he did that there. He pulled the SCVs, traded SCVs for Zealots. Of course, he's not going to get the kill move here because his units are hurt. He's out of medevacs. But again, the whole idea is keep the unit count low. Now he's at that point where he's like, okay, he's going to build up more Zealots. I didn't quite kill enough. You know, the Archons are still alive, so I'm going to try some movement plays. An idea here is this army is getting scary, right? There's 3 Templar. There is an Archon. He's back up to basically 11 Zealots again. So he didn't quite kill as many as he wanted. He wanted to really do a little bit more damage than that. And now he again can't engage the army straight up because, you know, there are 3 armor Zealots versus 1-1 Bio. 3 armor Zealots backed up a Storm against Bio with very low medevac healing power basically to back them up. So now he's going to try movement plays to keep the Protoss in their base for a little bit longer to while he can try to maybe catch up in upgrades and again, make the Protoss starve out. Unfortunately, what happens here is that Seed, of course, is really good, splitting the army up perfectly. The draw play, though, is beautiful right here. I mean, yes, Seed's going to defend us, but he's going to trade not terribly. He's not going to trade great. If you notice, he's only killing 1, 2, 3. He might kill like 5 Marine or 5 or 6 Zealots total here. So he's not trading amazingly here, losing all the Bio. But the goal here isn't to trade amazingly. It's to just get some trade going until the Protoss runs out of these mineral patches here. Meanwhile, again, trading to the front as well, getting a couple Zealot kills. These Zealots are sacrificial, thrown there to buy time to allow more warpins, right? So going forward, you know, trying to get some decent trades again as well here. basically to keep the Protoss unit count low. But what's killing him here is the medevacs are so low in energy because he's eating a couple big storms. So now he's at that point where, okay, he's kept the Zealot count low again. If we're at this point, he needs to remass up, pick off an Archon or two here. If we look back at the Protoss base, the Protoss is now hitting this syndrome where, okay, there's no minerals left anymore. There's still gas. So the Protoss can still pump a ton of Templar, but the Zealot production rate is going to be really, really massively cut. And if there's very few Zealots, all of a sudden the Templar aren't very scary because you can send in small squads about to snipe them, and there's no Zealots to kill those small squads as they're running to snipe the Templar. Seed now needs to take that fourth, and this is the point where MarineKing is waiting for. They're still down to 12 Zealots, and MarineKing's army is back fully healed up, and now what he needs to do is spread out, get a couple key Templar snipes, and then he can basically kill a third. If he kills a third at this point, he wins the game. So the Ghost's strategy here wasn't terrible, but it basically relies on denying the Protoss third, and that's something that MarineKing can almost do. A good dodge here, that Time Warp Storm combo, and that's pretty much what he needs to keep doing now. There's no more Time Warps, a few more Storms. And again here, it's getting a little bit iffy, because there's up to, what, 14, 15 Zealots, and there's 2 more Templar joined army. And as soon as it gets to this high Templar count, 6, it gets very hard to engage your army straight up without Ghosts. If it's 1 or 2 or 3, you can do it, but for a 6, it's very hard. Maybe your mobility play would be better. Again, the small unit here to snipe the Templar is a nice move. Unfortunately, it's a little bit... That squad was a little bit too big. It took a little bit more damage than he'd like to. And now he's trying to get those Templar snipes, but more and more Zealots joining the army. Now it's up to 17 Zealots, 3 Archons, 2 Immortals. And this is an army that's going to be extremely hard to engage. So this is where he really wants to go for the mobility plays. That's what he's doing, loading up a medevac. And of course, waiting for 2-2 to engage, loading some medevacs, and going to try to split the army up. Realizing that he can't quite take the full thing. Sees all the Zealots are pulled down to the bottom and says, okay, now that he has to send these Zealots here to deal with the drop, that's when all of a sudden all the juicy units are going to be a little bit less protected, and I can look for that engagement with my 2-2. He's going to try to drag the Zealots again over here in the main. And ideally, he'd snipe the Templar Archives here, but really the whole goal is just to drag a few units off and then get a good trade here, right? Not quite focusing splitting his attention between 2 buildings and not getting any kills. But the goal here is, again, draw... I mean, even if he killed the Templar Archive, it's not the biggest thing. The biggest thing is he has to kill a third base now, or he has to back up and try to survive until these Ghosts come out. So, doing some attack here, but this is the battle he's looking for. It's right here. And unfortunately, what happens is he slightly misjudges the range on those Storms here. So we can see here, again, he's looking at all the Templar. We're looking from MarineKing's vision here, going forward. I mean, one of the big problems, he never killed the Observer. And the high Templar lead, and if we look at MarineKing's vision, what's the front part of his vision right here, right? This is something that happens to Protoss players all the time, is they lose games because of this. Terran players don't lose it quite as often, just because it's a little bit harder. But every once in a while, at this stage in the game, you can't afford to do this. You can never afford, as a general principle, to have the extent of your vision being your army. Your main army should never be the first thing that sees something coming at you. And the reason why that's so important, unless your screen is exactly on it, so you'll have instant reflexes. But right now, MarineKing's screen is most likely on that drop, and so he misses the big storm there because he just sees it, waits a second before he pulls out, takes massive damage. And the reason that's so important is, one thing, a storm could hit you there, a fungal could hit you there. If you're, let's say your army's slightly weaker than your opponent, and you need to, ideally, you'd back up and defend a slightly further back position. If your army's in front of your vision, they may engage you before you get that chance to back up. This can happen to Protoss. It happens a lot against Terrans and Zergs. Their army's out there, they're back macroing, and the Zerg attacks their army and they miss the force fields because, they weren't there. So you always have to have that vision in front of your army. Seed had it with the Observer. If we switch over to Seed's viewpoint, right? He had the Observer seeing everything. So he knew MarineKing was walking into this, and he set a beautiful trap there. So MarineKing's played this game beautifully, right? He's up massive in food. He's got 2-2 upgrades now. He's looking for that engagement. But this is the point where you have to have that vision in front. If it's a scan, if it's a small squad of units, whatever it is. And remember I talked about microing against Storm? If the Templar are in the front like this, you just send 4 or 5 units, snipe a couple, force a couple Storms out, and then you keep doing that until they either put Templar in the back and you can engage and then kite back, or until they run out of Storms and you just win the game. Unfortunately, MarineKing a little bit over-eager and just absolutely gets mauled here by these Storms and loses basically everything. I mean, he was up by 50 food. He's still up by 40 food, but look at the food, right? It's basically it's really all dead. So, I mean, he has that food advantage, but they're so hurt. Now this is where you want to kite away from Templar when they're back. When the Templar come more to the front, then you try to turn around and do some damage. But his units are too hurt to even stim to be able to kite well, right? So he just has to kind of eat the damage. He's going to try to circle around and do some base race moves. But from here on out, basically, this army's going to get hunted down. And Seed has a dominant army, so now what Seed can do is basically kill these units. All he has to do is defend against his drop, which is these units are so hurt, he can do with a warp and rally, and then counter to this third base and win the game. So Seed takes it from here. We can see, I mean, the food's equal now just because he's killed so many units. So key thing about this game that was really cool. Well, one, first of all, I'd recommend go back and watch this game. This game, I think, MLG.TV. Just search for MarineKing under the MLG.TV search bar. You'll find this game pretty quickly, Game 4. Game 5 is pretty cool, too, so check that out. But and watch the whole game. There's a lot of tense micro-action. The builds are really awesome. But then also the cool thing to try to get from analyzing this game is, one, the way Seed adapted from MarineKing's play, right? He basically developed his build order to hard counter MarineKing's timing. He says, you're going to do that powering 2-base timing. I'll invest enough so that if I survive, I'll be way ahead, right? I'm not going to invest in 2 Oracles and a Stargate to counter you where I'll win if I survive, because that's too much money and I might not be able to survive like we saw in Cloud Kingdom. But I'll just invest in a single forge, cranking out upgrades, and fast storm. And then I'll have a big upgrade advantage going into the mid-game. I'll have storm tech, and off 2 bases, it's very hard for Terran to really add in ghosts effectively into their army. So the storm really is not going to have a great answer. And he's going to be way ahead going into mid-game. And then, of course, MarineKing, realizing the situation he was in, tried to just keep the action going, utilizing the micro to keep the Protoss army small. And if it's small enough, Protoss stays on 2 bases long enough, eventually they'll starve out. And that's true in other matchups as well. If you're Terran especially, if you can keep it on equal bases and keep the action going, 3 base, 3 base, 2 base, 2 base, your opponent will starve out before you because you can move your main nexus or main command center to a different location. And also, if let's say both players were on 3 bases, this applies to this situation as well, and their mains run out, but they can't take a 4th base, right? A Protoss with Zerg is now down to 2 bases mining. A Terran player is then on a 2 bases mining as well, even if they don't want to move their command center, but they still have 3 mules. So and then they're down to 1 base, but they still have 3 mules, right? So as the bases get smaller and smaller and smaller, Terran gets the more economic advantage. So if you can keep the army small, keep the action very fast, sometimes you can basically reclaim games even with a massive tech disadvantage by starving your opponent out. Anyways, I hope you guys check out this game. If you missed it, it was on yesterday. Remember, catch it at MLG.TV. It was a great game. The whole series was great. But that's it for today. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. There's going to be another match at 5 p.m. Eastern, and then Rules of Engagement will follow that. Thank you guys for watching. See you tomorrow.